Morning. My name is Greg Carr. I'm with 7-Step RPO. And as introduced, I'm going to talk a bit about how we, in 10 minutes or less, right? We have a clock up here somewhere? Perfect. How we leverage data analytics and some tools that we've developed to try to impact how we look at recruiting for our clients, how we drive internal processes, training, recommendations, and so on to essentially improve, what we're doing on an ongoing basis. We're all aware, right? I mean, everybody in the room at some level is in recruiting or tied to recruiting or provides product or services to folks in recruiting. And so we're aware that it's challenging, right? Lots of different reasons for that, of course, whether it's competition, the last point that was made by the previous folks here, there's a tremendous fight for these kinds of people. How people apply for jobs, the tools and systems that we use, it all changes really fast, right? And that puts all of us under a lot of pressure to figure out how to make that better. So we, in particular, and I'm sure a lot of folks, oh boy, skipping ahead, sorry, have paid attention to and tried to look at, among other things, how we can leverage different sorts of tools and methodologies to do what we do better. Okay, one of those areas that we examine is lean methodology. So essentially the elimination of waste, right? Saying, are there places that we can look at the recruitment process, identify things that are taking too long, those kinds of areas. We're going to kind of review them coming up, and I just kind of did it, so we'll get there in just a quick second. So we pay a lot of attention to this and trying to figure out what kinds of things are happening. The Japanese, in the context of Toyota, described this as muda, right? Again, areas of specific waste, okay? The funny picture, besides, being funny, is intended to try to drive home an acronym Tim would. When you look at waste, there are 7 sort of key areas, or 7 wastes, that, again, in lean manufacturing were identified as, again, areas that would slow down the output that you're trying to drive. Transportation, inventory, movement, waiting and delays, overproduction, overprocessing, and defects, right? In the interest of time, and also most applicability, I want to kind of highlight waiting and delays, overproduction, and defects, and talk about ways that we've used our systems to enable our clients and to enable our internal folks to drive better recruiting results, right? So we built a tool over the last 3 years called Talent AI. The AI is actionable intelligence, to basically say, hey, listen, we have to figure out a better way. We can, from a spidey sense perspective, identify where the waste is, right? I mean, everybody's got examples where hiring managers are taking too long to get back to us with feedback, right? A very common one, right? That's wasteful, right? But if you sort of know what's happening and intellectually you kind of, it's there, and you certainly have that sense, but then being able to go and adjust behavior, either internally, how should I train my people differently? Or what workflow should I build differently? Or how do I go to my client and say, cut the nonsense, do something about this and make this better for me. Without data, you're kind of thin in terms of your argument there, potentially. So we built, I keep doing this, I didn't mean to move forward that quickly. We built Talent AI to essentially provide a set of dashboards to harvest data from the different places that we get it, right? Your applicant tracking system. We leverage Avature as a CRM. We use a number of different RMP platforms in the context of our client engagements, all of which is great. You get great productivity from these tools. They enable a lot of great things from a procedural perspective, and they drive a lot of data. They drive a lot of great reports, right? But if you end up with 20 or 30 reports, sometimes it's difficult to sort of get it into a format that you can actually do something with and drive recommendations, right? So that's why we built Talent AI. So I want to talk about how we use that tool to impact 3 key areas of waste, right? And change our behavior internally, change how we train our folks, change recommendations we make to the customer, and change processes and tools that we leverage in the delivery of service to our customers. Okay. So waiting, I already provided an example of that, but we're certainly all aware of different examples where delay between one process step ending and another starting is problematic, right? We've finished the interview, the hiring managers finished the interviews, but now We don't have guidance as to, are we cutting these guys and going back to the drawing board and getting more slates, or are we going to move one of these guys forward and actually hire them? Okay? So time and step reports, we created these reports, and it's a tiny bit hard to read, but you can sort of get the sense. Each one of those bars is an example of a time and step measurement from when one process step ended and another begins, right? And we knew with this particular engagement that we had a problem, right? We just knew, the recruiters are saying, this guy's never getting back to me, this guy's never getting back to me, this guy's never getting back to me, right? So you build reports that say, hey, listen, let's actually measure this. You can't do it over 3 or 4 or 5 days. We did it over 3 months, right? And then we're able to come back and say, hey, listen, this isn't a one-off. This isn't an isolated incident. This is a pattern of behavior, okay? What you can't quite see, I don't think, maybe you can depending on where you're sitting, is that long bar, right, is your time between when the interview's done and we're trying to get feedback from the hiring manager was taken anywhere from 14 to 16 days, right? That's a long time. We can all agree on that, right? We all know the implications of that, right? That means you're essentially going to have to go back to the drawing board because your top candidates probably took another job, so on and so forth. So again, now you have the data. In this case, actually, we recommended training of the hiring managers. The client came back and said, we're going to escalate this to the executive team, and what they ended up doing was changing compensation for the hiring managers and saying, you're bonused at the end of every year. Now part of your bonus is tied to responsiveness and compliance with the recruiting process. So that was a rare and really significant win. It was a lot of fun. Overproduction is another example, right, that we've tried to really address concretely, right? So we recognize that we want all of our folks working hard, but at the same time we want people working hard on the right things, right? So continuing to source when you have a hard-to-fill job is something you should do, unless the person, you've already identified somebody that you can hire, or you've got a really strong pipeline of candidates coming in from an application perspective. In that case, your sourcers are probably better focusing on jobs that you don't have such a strong pipeline, okay? But identifying that, when you have 4 or 5 jobs that you're working on is probably fairly manageable. If there's folks in the room that hire 2 or 3 or 4 or 500 people a month, or 1,000 or 2,000 people a month, it's a little harder to do. It's a little harder to kind of get visibility into, right? So we built a system to sort of predict and signal for the recruiting teams what was happening. Okay, so the first red box that you're seeing there, well, all these columns on the left, there's some of them that we didn't put them all in because you can't fit it on the slide. But what goes into the data is things like how many people have applied, how many people we've sourced, how many people have actually interviewed, how many people have been made offers. There's algorithms built into the system that then assign a value. So when the recruiting leader walks in every morning, he or she looks at that and it says, hey, listen, here's what each one of these requisitions needs, right? And there's 4 kind of major groupings, right? We either need to source for that role, we need calls, right? The recruiter needs to pick up the phone and start screening candidates. We need feedback from the hiring manager, or we got to push process, right? Somebody needs to get a hold of that hiring manager and say, you're killing me, right? Commonsensical, right? But again, difficult to manage when you're getting that data from different places. The CRM system brings you your data as to how many people that you've sourced, right? Your ATS brings you the data around how many people have been interviewed, right? Putting it in one place is helpful. The other box kind of overviews what we call strike zones. So you don't want your recs to age, right? But you don't want to know that they're aging at day 60 or 70 or 45 or whenever you identify aging, right, is happening. You want to kind of identify it sooner so you can actually do something about it before it's kind of a escalated situation, right? So for example, what the system helps us with is saying, we have certain toll gates that we have to hit, right? If I'm going to stay on target, I need to introduce my first slate of candidates within 5 days or 10 days or whatever is prescribed in terms of our internal KPI. And as soon as you miss that, signals it, says, you're off target, we're out of compliance, that rec's going to age. We need to do something right now on that particular job at day 10 or 12 or what have you versus day 60. So really powerful in terms of driving behavior from a recruiting perspective. I think I'm actually doing okay. Third one I wanted to highlight in terms of, again, an area of waste and a corresponding place that we try to drive data and analytics to help us respond to it is in defects, okay? So examples where, again, everyone's working hard, but there's a disconnect, right? We're sourcing, but the recruiters are taking some of those people that have been generated and saying, not quite good enough. Or we're screening candidates, passing them through the hiring manager says, thanks, but no thanks, okay? That happens, right? But if it's happening a lot, it's a big problem, right? It's a real big problem, right? So by looking at each one of these steps in the process, you can probably imagine we have 7 steps in the process. We're able to say, okay, so what's going on here in each one of these areas and look at micro kind of touch points or checkpoints versus, again, the whole system. So this is an example of a place where we were trying to evaluate from a data perspective, candidate experience and say, okay, what kinds of things are happening, for this particular client when people apply? And are there places that we can impact the training of our folks, the procedural workflow that we're recommending, or systems, right? In this case, the dark, again, a little hard to read probably depending on where you're sitting, but the darker blue indicates people that, candidates who applied candidates who applied and got a response from the recruiting organization in between 1 and 5 business days. So pretty responsive, good stuff, right? Good news there is you get 60% response. That probably means that those folks are now, getting screened and processed and introduced, and all is well, conceivably, right? Hiring manager's happy, meeting good people. We've got the right folks into the process, and we should fill that job. So that's awesome. Problem is you got 30%, whatever that exact number is, approximately 30% of your people that are getting contacted between 2 weeks and, who knows what, 1 to 2 months. Big issue, right, in terms of candidate experience. For whatever reason, those people weren't contacted. Maybe they were just filtered out, and somebody forgot to push the button or forgot to make the phone call to say, thanks so much, but you're just not right for the job today, right? And the recruiter appropriately zeroed in on the people that were, so that they could, move people forward and get their roles filled, right? Figuring out what to do with that 30%, is critical, right? So what do you do with that? Well, you need to hire more people, or you need to buy a tool that helps us automate that process, or some version of that. But making the case for that, it's easy to get new budget into your talent acquisition organization, right? It's not. So being able to say, hey, listen, this is a real problem, right? We're a consumer brand, for example, and 30% of the candidates aren't getting touched. They're not getting touched because they're actually not appropriate. But I need your help in spending another $10,000 on this particular tool, or another $3,000 a month to add a part-time head, or whatever it happens to be, to say, let's make sure that those folks who we don't want to move forward with right now are getting touched and are getting contacted, and we are preserving the relationship with them. We're offering another way to keep in touch with us. Lots of us are building social media channels and talent communities and all kinds of great things to make sure that we can find ways to continue to nurture these guys. Building all of that stuff, but then not getting back to people for a month or two, pretty major disconnect. So again, those are 3 examples of places that we've leveraged Talent AI. We use other tools as well, but where we've really tried to emphasize the use of data and analytics to try to pay attention to process efficiency, and specifically in this case, eliminate waste. So thanks for the opportunity. I'm here with Beth Gilfeather, our CEO, Doug Lubin, our Director of RPO Solutions. Really excited to be here for the next couple of days, and looking forward to spending time with everybody.